Let's turn our attention now to Job 6 and 7, which comprise Job's response to Eliphaz. He begins by responding, saying that his vexation, his troubles, his pain are of an immense magnitude, and he seems to be indicating, as if you're saying to Eliphaz, you have no idea what I'm going through. Verse 2, oh, that my vexation were weighed, my calamity laid in the balances, it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. Maybe I spoke out of turn, but you have no idea what I'm going through. Here's a significant insight when we seek to assist someone going through tragedy. We must be very, very careful not to assume that we know what they're going through. And in fact, this is probably the worst thing we can say in an effort to comfort someone. I know what you're going through. The sufferer, even if we may have had a comparable pain, it's entirely possible the sufferer knows things that he or she have in their own mix which are not like ours and would justifiably lead them to say, you have no idea what I'm going through. In verses 8 to 13, notice his request to God. Verse 9, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. I wish my life would come to an end, he is saying. I wish that God would not sustain my life. I want to get out of this. I want to get off the ride. And he goes on through verse 13, indicating he's running out of strength. In 14 through 23, he focuses on the effect that his friends are having on him. And this is a candid assessment, indicating that what Eliphaz has brought has not been helpful at all. In verses 18 and following, he uses imagery of a caravan making its way through some very arid territory, hoping to find something to refresh them, and not finding it. He's saying, that's what you've done to me. I saw you coming, and I thought this would be a bright spot on my landscape, an encouraging point in my day, but you arrive, and, who asked you to come and give me this kind of help? It's not a help at all. As we come to chapter 7, one of the things we might want to pay attention to is verse 5, where he describes the physical condition that he is undergoing. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt. My skin hardens and then breaks out again. This would be just a terribly difficult disease to undergo. When we come to verse 13, we find another edge of his anguish. When I say, my bed, that is, turning to repose at night, will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, at least I'll get some relief when the sun goes down. And then notice what happens in 14. Then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions. So I would choose strangling and death rather than this body. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. I don't want to continue in this condition. Let me alone, for my days are a breath. In other words, please go away from me, God, for this portion is actually a prayer. This may not be evident at the beginning, but it becomes clearer as we come to verse 20. If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? This is a reference to God. Verse 21, why do you not pardon my transgression? This must be addressed to God. So he's telling God, at night I get no rest. I have these frightful dreams that terrify me. I am in trouble, whether it's daylight or darkness. A bit of comment is in order for verses 20 and 21, which is Job's wrap-up of this first response then to Eliphaz, the first friend who has sought to help him. So 20 reads, if I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? Why we want to pay particular attention to this is these two verses could be read with the understanding that Job is acknowledging wrongdoing, the very thing that Eliphaz hoped he would come to. Admit that you, Job, are the one who have done something wrong. You don't know what it is, but you've done something wrong, and you have called down on yourself this justifiable suffering for your wrongdoing. We might think that's what he's saying in chapter 7, verse 20, but commentators encourage us to notice that protasis, the conditional if, as very weighty. So if it should be that I have sinned, but I don't think I have, this is the connotation. To clarify this, I found helpful David Klein's notes in the Word Biblical Commentary. He wrote Job chapters 1 to 20, Word Biblical Commentary. I'll be reading to you from page 194. Again, it's David Klein's, Klines, and a very substantial scholar from the British Isles. So he writes on verse 21, it may appear that Job, in the very last verse of his speech, makes a fundamental admission of guilt when he asks, why don't you pardon me for my sin? Yet, if Job considers himself a sinner in need of divine forgiveness, we may well wonder why he has not such forgiveness from the very beginning of his suffering, rather than proclaim his desire for death and protest God's assaults on him. And you may recall this is exactly what Job has done earlier. Indeed, the supposition that Job acknowledges that he is guilty, this verse here, makes nonsense of the whole course of the book hitherto. It must rather be that Job means by, quote-unquote, my sin, that is, my sin as you, God, reckon it. Job is suffering, and unless God's dealings with human beings are quite arbitrary, a possibility that Job will only later seriously entertain, and Klein's refers us to chapter 9:22, God must have something against Job to make him suffer as he does. This is what Job is trying to make sense of now. That must be the case. And so Job, I'm inserting here, it's as though he shrugs his shoulders. And now I continue with Klein's quotation. Very well, says Job, I will not debate whether God is right in counting me a sinner. I'll only ask that he should overlook and, quote-unquote, forgive, that is, not punish, the sin of a feeble, dying man like myself. So I would encourage this viewpoint. I think Klein's gives us a helpful lens for reading this. It's as though Job is saying, I'll concede. All right, maybe I'm a sinner. That's fine. But are you not in the business of forgiving? And why have you not extended that to me? Just forgive me and then let me go. The last portion of verse 21 gives us an idea of Job's preferred state at the close of this plea for God to forgive him and let him go. For he says in 21b, for now I shall lie in the earth. The Hebrew of this could be rendered as follows. For at this time, the Hebrew is atah, right now. The I shall lie in the earth, the same form, can have the connotation of I desire to. And the word for earth is not what we might expect. Eretz, it's rather afar, dust. And this presents the picture most likely of physical deterioration, coming from dust, being made from the dust of the earth. Thus to say, at this time, I desire to lie in the dust, could likely be an expression of wishing that his end of life would come right now. And then the phrase, you will seek me, but I shall not be, is to say, if you, God, were to try and hunt me down at that point, I will no longer be in earthly existence. I would be beyond that frame. For this reason, it seems that the sentiment of verse 21 is, pardon me, let's get that over with, issue me a release from my guilt, and then let my life draw to a swift conclusion so that I can escape this suffering.